Okay. Can people see a
Good.
slide that says hi?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alrighty. So, yeah, I'll try and keep to 20 minutes. I've got a few extra slides at the end, which we can use if I have time. Otherwise, I'll just barrel through. So I just wanted to give everybody a quick overview of why the foundation is here and starting. So hi, I'm George Oates. I worked at Flickr from its beginnings to late in 2008, and now I'm back. I've returned to lead the new Flickr Foundation, which exists to figure out how to make Flickr last for just 100 years for now, Zarino, not centuries just yet. And Flickr turns 18 years old this year, turned 18 years old. It's certainly one of the older web platforms online today. We can probably all list 3 or 4 web things that are about the same age. And it's grown into one of the largest image collections humans have ever assembled. I think roughly only Facebook is bigger, and well, Meta owns Instagram as well, so that's bigger still. But nonetheless, Flickr's huge. It's not just the size that matters. To me, at least, it's how you use it. I mean, to me, the most interesting part about Flickr is how many of us have contributed to it. To me, that's what makes this valuable. It can hold millions of different histories from all kinds of places. So we'll talk about standards. You know, the standards on Flickr are sort of community generated, if you like. So let me take you down on a trip down memory lane to 2004 and to this picture taken at a conference called eTech on the 10th of February by a nice chap called Boris. He was in the audience when Stuart Butterfield, Ben Cerveny and Eric Costello launched Flickr. And here's a photo taken in the same room of the guys getting settled just a few minutes earlier by another nice chap called Chris Heathcote, who I'm proud to say is now a good friend of mine. I found this one because Chris left his photo as a comment on Boris's. And if you look closely at that picture, you'll see a crunchy opening slide for their talk, which is called Transcendent Interactions. And you can find a copy of that on SlideShare, and we'll be grabbing one for the Foundation archives. It talks about designing context for interactions and not just designing applications. Here's a tiny record of what the site looked like in that first year or so. It was really weird when it started. I'm not sure how many folks on this call saw it in 2004, 2005, but, you know, people stuck around and began to share their lives and pictures with their friends, and it just took off. So here's a graph of uploads over time. Please note this graph is approximate. I know the starting point and the end point, and basically I've just filled in the gaps. So that's me rewriting history. I just did that. It's that easy to rewrite history. Sorry, Andy. But I do know that the millionth picture was uploaded in October of 2004, which is about 8 months after the platform launched. And here it is. It's called Araness versus the Sale. I had to resist the temptation to scale it up in the presentation because I wanted to also make the point that this is the biggest size of that picture available on Flickr. And those other pics we saw of Stuart and the crew were 500 by 375 pixels, which is what, you know, the best camera phone was taking at the time. But yeah, we're at billions today from millions of people. And there aren't that many, if any, actual traditional cultural organizations in the world that have holdings made by millions of different people. And none that I know of that have collections in the billions. We're putting our cultural heritage onto content platforms now, YouTube, Reddit, Flickr, or Facebook, and people don't especially expect these things to survive. It's weird. We've been conditioned to expect they're probably ephemeral because they mostly have been. And as I've been telling friends and people I meet that I'm back at Flickr working on the foundation, they usually say something like, oh my God, I've got 10,000 family photos there and that's the only place I've got them. Or, oh yeah, I used to love that. Oh, who owns it now? Or, ugh, got so much worse after Yahoo bought them. But fun fact, Yahoo bought Flickr in March of 2005. So just 1 year and 1 month after that launch at eTech. Yahoo Photos closed down in 2007. All Yahoo Photos account holders got an email suggesting they migrate to Flickr. That was an interesting year for the community on Flickr, welcoming hundreds of thousands of new friends all at once. And actually, I don't know how many images were deleted from Yahoo servers because of that shutdown. Then in 2017, Yahoo and therefore Flickr was acquired by an even bigger fish called Verizon Media. And here's the thing that most people don't know, and that's that Flickr was nearly destroyed back in 2018, about a year later. The story goes something like this. This is a Verizon executive, Mr. Gorapan, mentioned in a January 2019 Wall Street Journal article called Verizon to lay off 7% of media group staff. And he was one of the people doing a bunch of reorganization at Verizon that Flickr was caught up in. And the article says he had halted some efforts to sell brands within the media business, opting instead to shutter flagging brands or services. He viewed the process of selling photo sharing service Flickr last year, for example, as too pricey and too time-consuming, people familiar with the matter said. Now, wouldn't it be interesting to see the material he used to reach that decision? Was it a spreadsheet? Like, who were the other people involved? You know, the real story is obviously way more complex than I've explained. You know, I mean, their revenue had dropped to just $1.8 billion for Q3 that year. So, of course, they needed to trim some dead weight, of course. But, you know, that's called the economic pressure of divesting. That's what nearly killed Flickr in 2018. It was too pricey for them to even sell it. That's what they decided. It was cheaper for them to destroy it. Luckily, there were folks on the inside at Yahoo who helped arrange the sale and to transfer all of the stuff to the team at the new owners, SmugMug. And I hope to find out who those folks were one day so I can take them out for a nice dinner. Flickr isn't just a brand, it's an archive. Now have a look at this headline from USA Today. That's the article that announced SmugMug had acquired Flickr in 2018. It says, exclusive, Flickr bought by SmugMug, which vows to revitalize the photo service. You don't hear a company vow to do something very often, do you? But, you know, I've appreciated the language that the SmugMug folks have used since they rescued Flickr from the jaws of Verizon execs. Rest easy, they say, our products aren't going anywhere. It's interesting, isn't it, this new and reassuring tone? In fact, SmugMug are a member of a US-based collective called the Tugboat Institute, whose purpose is to build and scale private, profitable, enduring, and market-leading businesses that make a dent in the universe. Sort of America speak, but it sounds good, you know, this idea of enduring. So the McCaskells are already working on building a long company, and SmugMug itself is actually older than Flickr. It was created in 2002. So as I mentioned, I've been back at Flickr for about, just over a year now, and we've been talking about the foundation a bit here and there. And I wanted to direct you to this tweet from April-ish this year that stopped me in my tracks and made me go, huh. It's from Jason Scott, who's a boisterous digital archivist who runs the archive team and works on the software archiving at Internet Archive. He tweeted, but as Flickr tries to refashion itself with a new goal of sustainability and continued access, please, McCaskells, remember that whether you intended to or not, you bought a World Heritage Site that comes with all the same headaches, but all the same weight. I was like, oh, what? A World Heritage Site? Oh my God, it was hard enough already. Now it's a digital World Heritage Site. But if you believe that we might be dealing with a World Heritage Site, shouldn't we be treating these huge platforms more carefully, more sustainably, more as a commons perhaps? Like, to be fair, 50 billion images is really just the Wild West. It's so huge. We could just say, you know, enjoy it, best of luck. We'll do our very best to keep it looking nice. But it's also full of networks and close looking and photos you probably remember and friends you might have made. It's definitely more than the sum of its parts. Here's one of those McCaskells. That's Ben. He's the COO and president, and he's the person who reached out to me in the pandemic to see if I'd like to come back and help. He's also the person, along with his brother Don and the SmugMug team, who forked over real cash money and time and big effort to extract it from Yahoo. Or was it Verizon? And he's also the person who's supported creating the new foundation. So it's like deleting Flickr now would be like burning 100 big libraries all at once. You know, sure, it's durable, it's on Amazon Web Services and all that. But now that we've had the web for about 30 years, we've all witnessed how durable things have disappeared without a trace. And actually, I think we're still really young in terms of our robust and durable digital things, especially things that are more than just a bucket of files. And Flickr is full of connective tissue, social and descriptive connective tissue. So an archive in the form of a folder of JPEGs just doesn't cut it. So the question I have and posing to everybody who will listen is how we would align Flickr to a future public domain. And, you know, Flickr can do things in ways traditional archives can't. You know, this concept of social cataloging that happens there is unique and it's deeply interconnected. It's an archive made of millions of voices and there's room for millions more. This digital World Heritage Site has to be treated differently. And, you know, the thing about a true commons is that it's not only about resources managed in the commons, like photos and software and hardware and stuff, but it's also about the social norms that surround and shape that management. You know, I think we have to start investigating the general morality of corporates being able to delete stuff like this and recenter around what a 21st century commons could be like. You know, we have to start asking what owning a 21st century commons even means, and especially in these gigantic systems where there's millions of stakeholders. It's a different scene. You know, it's maybe time for us to make the conscious shift from cool applications owned by corporations and, you know, from technologies to meaningful infrastructures. So I've also been wondering about possible futures for Flickr, and I've come up with a few main ones I'd like to share today. So the first one is, let's start with the worst case scenario. First one is annihilation. You know, perhaps it will be destroyed. Perhaps it will be deleted. So there's the giant bin of destruction and there's Flickr going into it and boom, it's gone. Okay. You know, then we can all get back to our lives, not worry about it anymore. The libraries are on fire, but it's all right. Future two, perhaps Flickr will continue to grow at the same trajectory. Perhaps it will become truly gargantuan. You know, it's already one of the biggest collections we've ever assembled. And imagine if that rate continued for 100 years. You know, is that what we want? Is that even a good thing? There's a possible future where we don't even make pictures ourselves anymore too. I mean, I think that's unlikely that we'd completely stop, but now there are already new picture makers, although they're still directed by us, more or less. This is a picture from a New York Times article called "We Need to Talk About How Good AI is Getting." You can see a machine-generated image of a black and white vintage photograph of a 1920s mobster taking a selfie, which is generated by OpenAI's Dolly program. It's interesting to watch how copyright is developing around these machine-generated pictures, by the way. And then you zoom in to the mobster and you see how creepy it is at the edges. And you're like, ugh. Yeah. These computers really don't know what they're doing yet, or they have no conception of us at all. But still, there's a picture here that no human created, you know. But that's a whole other conversation about the already centuries-long research project called "What is a Photograph?" and well beyond this chat. Perhaps it could be read-only. You know, perhaps the service could stop accepting new members or new uploads. But even if there were no more photos added to Flickr, I believe it's still worth preserving. You know, most traditional institutions are read-only to the public anyway. But, you know, the point here is we're putting our cultural heritage directly into corporate spaces now at astonishing rates. And we don't treat those platforms like we treat our great libraries and archives. We don't expect the same stability. And I think we need to change that. You know, perhaps it'll be scattered to the winds. This sometimes happens with archives. And actually, it's not a bad idea for digital archives to make lots of copies. So decentralization and diffusion are definitely approaches to explore. But dandelions can really suck because then you're dealing with proliferation of metadata as well. So 2 copies of the same digital image in 2 digital places. How do you know which is the golden copy? And in particular, if the metadata diverges, which version is right? It's quite fiddly stuff. Sometimes a photograph can even have 2 different licenses associated with it in 2 different platforms, which is not a good thing. Some archivists will tell you that the context of the thing is almost more important than the thing itself. So if we're distributing images all over the internet, what's their context? Perhaps it will slowly fade or degrade. Actually, I think this is quite likely. It was good to hear, I think the word was decommissioning that we used in the morning. Actually the process of de-accession is normal in traditional cultural organizations, although it can be controversial at times. It's usually linked to either physical space or the need for cash. And these orgs will have collection development policies, which incidentally, we're trying to develop one now at the Flickr Foundation, in particular for the Flickr Commons program. And these will outline how and when and under what conditions things can be or may be de-accessioned. But, it's a really huge question. What do we want to keep? Not all things are meant to be kept for all the ages, and certainly not all of us expect or want our stuff to be kept forever. I mean, it's going to be bloody hard to keep 50 billion digital things alive, and that's even if it doesn't grow any bigger. So I'm actually wondering whether we could make a particular way to gather specially selected things for deep keeping in some kind of capsule. And I was thrilled that the talk of ritual came up this morning, because I've been thinking a lot about ritual myself, both internal to the organization and also external to Flickr members. Maybe every year, everyone with a Flickr account could choose one of their pictures to deep keep, and maybe even one from somebody else. This would be guaranteed to survive in some way. Printing is an obvious solution here, by the way. We're really good at keeping things on paper, but printing doesn't capture the true nature of a Flickr picture, which is this interconnected, networked thing. So the future of Flickr is likely, I think, to be some blend of those possible futures, and that's the territory for the foundation to explore. Let me just do a quick time check. I'll tell you just very briefly about a couple of the projects, but just want to note that there'll be a lot more information on flickr.org coming up soon, so you can check on info about projects and programs and team. We'll be hiring as well, so keep an eye out if this is interesting to you. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a quick sense of one of the projects we've been working on as we've been establishing the foundation, and that's a bit of a provocation called a 100-year plan. And I've been running workshops. I've done just under 10 workshops now with different groups in different places. But the short answer is I don't know how to write a 100-year plan, but that's what the workshops are for. And I think, I think we need to start figuring it out. Otherwise, we're going to keep losing all this cultural heritage that we're pumping into these online services with no particular, infrastructural expectations. But certainly writing a 100-year plan should be a group project. I think it would be ridiculous hubris on my part if I, wrote a plan like that in isolation. And it's going to take at least 100 years to dissolve the patriarchy anyway. But yeah, like I said, while I've been setting the foundation up, I've started doing research about the plan. I'm keen to gather people's ideas and responses to thinking in this kind of time frame, and hopefully early next year we'll be publishing some kind of guide or template, just in case you want to borrow that structure that we've been working on to put into the context of your own org. And I'll just end perhaps with this slide. So some very early patterns are emerging about our general desire to protect the natural world. There's also a theme about the sorts of things we would need to design to create an organization that can move in the same direction across generations. Like the temples that Paula was talking about before. We're at the very beginning. We're at like day one of thinking about how the temple needs to operate, things like mentorship, documentation and translation across different generations of staff, thinking about how to design stuff for colleagues who haven't even been born yet is a crazy mind-bending question. I don't think there will end up being much mention of technology in the plan. You know, we don't even know if we'll have JPEGs in 10 years. But what we can do is plan for the inevitable technology questions to be thoroughly addressed at regular intervals, a little bit like the content review that we just saw before on the NHS. But that'll have to be done by the team of the day, you know. Doesn't seem much point in trying to anticipate how many servers we'll need to buy in 2050. But yeah, Zarina, if it's okay, maybe I'll just end there and chuck it back to you. Is that okay?